Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today I'm talking to Jeff Alberts and Brad Loomis about coaching yourself in the gym. This isn't necessarily about whether or not you have a coach at all or whether or not someone else is doing your programming. It's more about the way you handle yourself mid-session as a trainee and an athlete. So the guys offer some super practical and direct advice in this one as they discuss the ways that they tweak their program when they're feeling extra good and what calls they make when they're having some especially crappy days. You'll hear about how all these strategies keep them engaged and healthy, but then you might still wonder how the hell are they still progressing? Aren't they straying from their program? And the answer is both yes and no. So Jeff, who programs for himself, and Brad, who's coached by Eric Helms, both tell you how these constant self-coaching calls fit into their daily training sessions. You'll also hear about how much wiggle room these guys give their athletes to make their own decisions within the confines of their assigned programs, and what calls that they hope their clients learn to make for themselves over time. So whether you have a coach or not, whether you are a coach or not, this episode is full of things to consider as a responsible athlete who's in the lifting game for the long haul. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 98. Let's get into it. Please enjoy this talk all about self-coaching in the gym with Brad Loomis and Jeff Alberts. I think we should maybe start by setting the stage by what we mean by self-coaching, sort of ish. So, like Brad, for instance, you have a coach, but we're still going to talk about how you coach yourself. Can you explain how, what are things that Eric gives you, and then what are things that you might do that fall within that, but you have, you're the driving decision maker, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think probably it'd be best to start with what Eric doesn't want me to do, right? We all have those days in the gym where we're just feeling phenomenal, Uh-huh. And this is, in my opinion, the real value of having a coach.
Okay.
Is that, you don't want to, there's a big picture plan in place. And so you don't want to blow their whole plan out of the water. So on those days that you are feeling good and you do want to, take it to the house or do an AMRAP on something that, you should not be doing an AMRAP on, I've got kind of Eric, kind of in the back of my mind, kind of back there talking to me saying, like us coaches do, well, I mean, you could do that, but
yeah.
To me, that's very useful, is just when not to be, a jerk in the gym and just totally blow your coach's whole plan out of the water, right?
What would be an example of that?
Well, a good example for me is because I do tend, I'm not a person who gets real reppy, right? I don't just decide because Eric's got on there to do 8, I'm going to do 12 or 15, right? But what I have tended to do is, if he's got a particular load on there and he wants me to do 3x5, maybe I'll start with a set of 5 at that load, and then I'll jump 10 or 15 pounds and do a 3x5 with that load. Mm-hmm. And then I'm feeling great, and then jump another 5 or 10 pounds and do a 3x5 with that load, right? That's how I would abuse, that rule, I guess you might say, of coaching an athlete, right? Okay. And then, of course, I know what's going to happen after that. I'll either be more sore or I'll be less snappy, at the next session, less responsive, just a little more sluggish. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the best place to start is kind of what I can't do, right?
Yeah.
But then, yeah, what I can do, he's pretty much said this as at the outset. It's like, you know what, if you need to auto-regulate those days, try to keep somewhat of the structure 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you need to flip 2 and 3, that's okay. If you need to flip 4 and 2, that's okay. If you need to kind of combine things because you're traveling, like remember last year when we traveled to Australia, I kind of had to cram everything in together, at the beginning of the week, and then we traveled, and then, I had to kind of put everything together in the following week. So he lets me do those things just pretty much at will, which I think is a good thing. I mean, Jeff knows this. Some days you don't have it, and some days you do. And some days what you have on the plan for 3 days from now is going to work a whole lot better today than it would be to do what today's job is, right?
Yeah.
And then, outside of that, a lot of any latitude that he gives me is with my secondary work. So I've got my primary work, my big 3, right? And he programs that very meticulously, using percentages and, context of whatever the last block is. He might bring reps up this block. He might bring them down this block, whatever. But the secondary work, he'll say, okay, here's kind of our most important stuff. The green stuff, get that done first. And when I say green, he might have it in green font, or he might have it highlighted in green. The yellow stuff, that's still important, but if you have to miss 1 or 2 of those, go ahead. And then, he'll have like the red stuff. This stuff, you can kind of skip if you need to. So, without dragging on, more so, and maybe saving some for later on, I think that's probably a good kickoff point, for what he does as far as giving me the reins on calling audibles.
Yeah, and going off that, it just immediately, if you're like, this is the great part about coaching, constraints are set for me. But then that happily gets us into Jeff, who doesn't have that, who makes up his own training. Not makes up, like every time he walks in the gym, what am I going to do today? But like, he creates his own program. So Jeff, how do you, if you have no one to report to, how do you find that you're able to coach yourself? And we'll start with like what Brad said. How do you find you're able to keep constraints when you're feeling extra good or something like that?
I'm pretty good at the big picture. And I think that's just because of all the experience I've had. Like, I know, like, if I, let's say, like Brad was saying, it's like, oh, I feel good today. And it's like, oh, my squats are feeling really good. Let me throw another 25 pounds on here. I know I'm probably going to end up paying the price later, like either the next session or the next day or the next week. Like, it tends to carry over, and it may disrupt some of my future workouts. And I've gotten myself in hot water doing that, where, I've, especially now with at my age, it's like one seriously overreaching workout can really bleed into the other ones just because my recovery is not like what it used to be. And it could bring on these little niggles, little aches and pains. So that I know from experience. But there still are times where I do feel like, there's some days where I'm like, what, I can get after it here. And it's usually on less risky stuff. So it's like, okay, maybe I can do one more row. Maybe I can do one more curl. One more set of squats or deadlifts, or, hey, let's load the bar up there. That's a little more risky. So I tend to try to be patient with those things. Yeah. I'm not perfect. Like, I still have my days where I'm like, oops, I shouldn't have did that. And actually, yesterday I actually made some very good judgment calls, because I was supposed to do, on my squats, I was supposed to do 365 for 3 sets of 3. And as I was acclimating up, like the first warm-up set, I was like, I feel okay. But then once I put on 2 plates, I'm like, I felt like a little twinge in my upper glute, my right upper glute. Uh-huh. Then I put, okay, let me see if I could just work this out. So I kept acclimating up. Once I got to 295 and did a double, it just didn't feel right. Like, it wasn't going away. I'm like, okay, if I put on my 365, that's going to light that shit up, and I'm probably not going to be able to walk in the morning.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let me make an audible here. So, okay, let me deviate from squats here, and go to another movement. And just gauging, from experience, I'm like, okay, let me try. And I'm limited as far as like a gym equipment. Obviously, you guys know that, in a home gym. So I'm like, let me try Smith squats. That way, the way I could mimic that is like mimic a hack squat rather. I put my feet out in front, and it just basically takes a lot of the hip hinging out. And yeah, it was just a lot of emphasis went straight to my quads. So I was able to do that movement pretty pain-free. And I was like, okay, well, I need to get some type of hip hinging here. Let me try maybe dumbbell RDLs after that. And it was a no-go. I'm like, nope. So I just said, you know what? I just can't hip hinge today. So it is what it is. I'll take what I can get. And that way I can wake up. And, today I woke up feeling decent. I'm like, okay, if I would have squat and went with the plan, I could have made things a lot worse for myself. So I really try to keep my ego in check. That's the best way to describe it, and to utilize the tools that I have. Like, there's other exercises I can do. Like, there's other rep ranges I could do. I mean, there's all kinds of things I can do to get some work in without breaking the bank, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have to keep yourself from being an idiot in that way more? Like, or do you feel like you're making yourself be like, whoa, don't do that, that'd be stupid? Or like are the changes more calm yourself down, or are they more like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it doesn't, so like, watch me train, like, it looks like I'm so boring, like, it doesn't look like I'm trying.
Depends who you ask.
Yeah, but I mean, like, all my workouts, like, they're pretty intense even, but yeah. So I know I'm putting in enough effort. So I wouldn't say never, but I would say probably 80-90% of the time I don't question the effort, like where I have to say, oh, Jeff, you need to really push yourself and get after it more. It's the opposite. Like, hey, you need to be more careful, especially now later in my career, like where I'm a little more fragile than I was like when I was in my 20s and 30s. So I need to be very cautious of where I'm at. So it's more like I make sure I'm holding myself back more than actually pushing myself.
Okay, so then someone might ask, why don't you just make your program less intense? Since you're in charge of that, and if every other session or something, you're like, oh, I had to tone this down, I had to tone this down, I had to tone this down. So then someone might argue, well, why not just dial your program down? How do you know that that's not the call to make?
If I dial my program down, I won't be training at all. So no, just kidding. Not much but it is conservative. Like on my squats, I'm like, okay, I want to try to keep at least 2 in the tank. If I do more than 2 in the tank, I even said it on Instagram. I think it was last week. Hey, that pushed, or on my YouTube video, that's a little too much intensity there. And that wasn't the programming. That was me trying to make shit happen. So it's not so much the programming. I tend to, just like by nature, I tend to grind a little bit harder than I probably need to. So I still like a process of, hey, Jeff, you don't need to do that last rep. You can keep it toned down a little bit. But yesterday wasn't so much a programming issue. It was more of like the reason why I think I was having that issue was I went to the beach for a couple of days. The drive there was like 4 hours. The drive back was 4 hours. So it was a lot of sitting in the car. I didn't get, like on Saturday night, I stayed in this shitty ass hotel. If you're ever in Monterey, I forget the name of the hotel. There's like this shitty ass hotel there, and the people next to us, 12:30 at night, they were just like snockered up, man. Just like they were like drinking in front of their hotel room, in front of our room, just super loud. I was like 20 seconds away from opening the door and like smashing someone, but I got terrible sleep that night.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think it was just like fatigued. My body was cramped up from sitting. So, and then I like during the day too, like on Monday, I was at my desk sitting all day working. I think I was just super, super stiff.
Yeah.
It just wasn't ready to squat. And looking in hindsight now, everything's always easier to see in hindsight.
Of course.
I probably should have flipped my days. Hey, let's do upper body on Monday. Let's do lower body on Tuesday. That way I could have been a little more mobile.
Yeah, which is another good example of a way that you could stay within your program but still make it work. Yeah.
So, when you do upper lower splits, that's such an easy switch to do. That doesn't disrupt too much.
Yeah.
Well, and to Jeff, if you could interrupt me if I'm incorrect here to elaborate more on Andrea's question of why don't you just dial your program down a little bit. One thing I've noticed with you is that your training a lot of times kind of follows your emotions, and it seems like you're very much an emotional trainer. And when you get motivated, it seems like the 20, 30-year-old comes out in you. and you're like, let's get after this, sometimes it seems like you pick up the frequency a little bit, or, sometimes I'll see you on Instagram and I'll be like, when did he start deadlifting 4 plates again? And it seems like when you get motivated, it seems like that's when the type A alpha dude comes out in you, and you start coming after it. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but, just kind of elaborate on that a little bit too. How do you deal with trying to suppress the Hulk in you that wants to come out?
When you want to turn green.
I think when you well, shit, Brad, when you're 47 and you feel good, you're like, I need to take advantage of this. And so you try to, that's when you try to get after it and push more. And coming off of that prep, right? Like, so seeing me go to 4 plates on deadlifts, that's because I gained some weight, got some food coming in. I'm like, okay, I could actually do this. And that ran its course because I was doing linear progression after that, and it worked well. But then it got to that point, linear progression, it'll only last so long before you hit a wall. And that's what happened. Like, I did 4 or 5 for I think it was like 3 or 4 reps on the first set. I'm like, okay, good. I'm still hitting my rep target. With 2 in the tank, I'm like, cool, I'm still there. Second set, second rep, couldn't even get it off the floor. So right there told me, and it felt terrible. Like, it felt unsafe. I felt like I was going to bust something. I'm like, you know what? This is dumb. I'm going to be hitting my head against the wall if I keep trying to do this progression scheme. So right then and there, I knew immediately I need to change gears. And that's where I decided to go from like trying to do a 3 to 5 rep range. I just said, let me go 8 to 10s on deadlifts because it's easier off the floor. I can move it comfortably. So the way I'm progressing that is I'm just sticking with the same load for a whole entire block, which is 3 or 4 weeks long. So, for example, last month I did 355. I did 3 sets the first week, did 4 the second, and then 5 sets the third week. And then I just bumped load up 10 and just bringing it back down to 3 sets and repeating that. So it's linear in a different way. It's just, okay, now let me see if I can get sets going instead of load.
Yeah.
And it feels so much more comfortable and safe. But yeah, like Brad said, sometimes when you feel good, you're just like, man, I got to get after it here. But that's what I'm getting better at, is knowing, like learning, like, okay, once I hit that wall, like, okay, don't be dumb and keep trying to force. Because in the past, I would be like, oh, I can get that 405 next week. I know I'll be able to do it. A little more food, a little more rest, I'll get it. Whereas now I'm like, no, that, you know what, that won't be too bright if I do that. Yeah. And if I want to keep sustained progress going, I need to find an alternative way of keeping my progress going. I'm not power, like, just to say, I'm not a power lifter, so that's not my goal, is not to go for a 1 rep max. I'm trying to get volume in. And I know there's going to be people out there, well, you don't need to do deadlifts to get your volume in. But I can look at past experience. I can look at photos from when I didn't do deadlifts for years. And then I can look at the years I did do deadlifts, and there's a huge change in physique, especially posterior chain on the lower half from that exercise selection. So
yeah, I think
just trying to find a balance, like, how do you balance all these moving parts? That's what I love about it. It's like it never ends. Like, you're just going to do this forever until you can't move anymore, and you're going to be trying to find ways to keep progress going. And so there's just a ton of moving parts.
And it's interesting because most people can't like that's a good example of why, even though we're in this conversation, we're going to talk about how how we all within the confines of our program can manipulate things and self-coach here and there, but like that's why nobody can coach Jeff's training. like Brad, that's not in my program, it's not in Brad's program, to just be like, I know I was doing 3s and now I'm doing 8s to 10s, and like, to some who are inexperienced, don't know what that feels like, aren't within your body, that might sound like you're changing your program. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't want one of your athletes to do that without you knowing it.
No, I mean, if they came to me and said, hey, coach, that last deadlift session sucked, I felt like I was going to snap. Then, of course, I'd ask a bunch of questions, why, how'd you feel, this, blah, 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 get some context around it, what preceded that training session, were things in order and all that. And if it's definitely the way I was feeling, like everything was pretty much in order, everything was flowing pretty well, then all of a sudden you're just like, boom, you're at high risk for injury, then let's not bust you up. Let's find alternative ways to try to get you to progress. And I've also done too, like deadlifts. I've gone away from deadlifts whenever I get to a point where they're just like, they're starting to feel terrible. Just throw them out. Let me go RDL, or let me do some other hip hinge movement for a while. Not hip thrust, but like cable pull through, something that's a little bit easier to do, give my body a break, and then when I feel good again, then introduce them back in.
Yeah. It's just so hard, not hard. For most of our listeners, they're not in a place where they could or should be making some of the calls that Jeff makes, because then they fall into usually like our program hopping episode, something like that, where they, when it's too emotional or what most people, though, it's not even like the emotion excitement, it's the excitement of I just learned something, or so and so I followed did this thing. It's more like a lack of attention or focus, whereas Jeff's calls are usually like, because I have all this experience and I know that these changes make me feel this way.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like, the calls I'm making is not because I'm like, hey, look, Alberto's doing this new exercise in his program, let me do that. Like, I get that all the time. Like, hey, Alberto's doing this, so I'm going to do it. Or so-and-so's doing it, so I'm going to do it.
Ruining it for the team.
Like, every once in a while, like Alberto's made plenty of suggestions. Hey, Jeff, try this exercise. This might feel like my single arm overhead dumbbell press. Like, I was doing 2 at a time. Like, I was doing military press, got injured, and I was struggling. He's like, hey, try this movement out. And he showed, actually in the gym, he showed me how to do it. And I ran with that for, how many years? Like 4 years or whatever. Like, that was a great call. So, but it wasn't because, hey, Alberto's doing this movement. It was like, hey, Jeff, this might help you because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, let me try that, implement it, and see. So it's not, I don't do those emotional calls where, oh, look, that's an exciting thing they're doing.
Or whatever.
Yeah, a shiny new toy. Yeah.
Okay, so then where I think it gets trickier. A tricky thing for me, too, which is, I know Brad I'm looking forward to asking you about this, because I suck at RPE-based training. I'm getting better at it, but there was a time where it was prescribed to me by my coach, which was Bert at the time, and I'm pretty sure I fucked it up real bad for a long time, because I had no personal constraints, because I was given too much freedom. And I know that you as a powerlifter, and from what we know now and all your experience, like auto-regulation and you being able to work within RPE prescriptions is really useful for you. What's the question? Like, how the fuck do you do it, Brad? Without busting yourself up, or vice versa, without being a bitch about it sometimes.
Yeah, I'm still getting better about it, because I definitely, especially with RPE, I will tend to be a little bit of a bitch about it. You know what I mean?
That's your tendency?
Which sounds, exactly. I mean, it sounds very counterintuitive, but I do tend to do that, and so, yeah, it's an evolution, and there for a little bit, Eric would help me by kind of giving me an A or a B choice. You know what I mean? So he would have me lift something. He'd say if it felt like it was, a 6 or greater, you use this load. And then, if you felt like it was a, 5.5 or less, then you would use this load. Right.
So like a daily tester within your session.
Exactly. Okay. And that helped me quite a bit. Because the only way that I really knew how to find out if I was being a little bitch or not was to just kind of test myself in the set. You know what I mean? And I could do it within the constraints, of our program. And, so like, for example, if I was supposed to go to an RPE of 9, where I've got 1 left in the tank, and I chose such and such a load to do that, I'd get to that repetition. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's a 9. But I'm not quite sure. So I'll go ahead and try one more. You know what I mean? And so then I would try one more, and I'm like, no, that was not a 9, because I'm pretty sure I can do another one.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to play a little bit. You know what I mean? And if I was supposed to work to a 9, I would work to what I would think was a 9 and then test it. And then most of the time I would find out, no, that was not a 9. That was actually an 8.5. And so then I learned from that. And if I knew kind of if something else felt like that speed or that effort, it wasn't a 9. It was probably more like an 8.5. And then I would know that I had maybe 2 more left in the tank, But at the same time, it's on the flip side of that, there's nothing wrong with testing that and then finding out you were wrong the other way. You know what I mean? Where to like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's a 9, but I'm going to try one more, you know, just to find out. And then guess what happened?
Fail.
It either pinned me or it was such a grinder, you know, that last one was actually not a 9. It was a 9.5 or, you know, possibly a 10. And that didn't seem like it put me in a hole, you know, for the next session or the next week or whatever it was that I was doing. So that was kind of a neat learning experience, was kind of just in the moment, in the set, while I'm underneath the bar, testing things a little bit and finding out, yeah, Brad, you are kind of being a bitch. You know, that's not a true 9. You know, that's an 8.5, maybe even an 8 if you tried it again and still felt like you had one left, you know.
I feel like what's hard about that. Go ahead,
That's
Jeff.
crazy he's saying this, because when I first met the dude, he was just like RPE 12.
It was a 14 out of 10.
Went 2 reps ago.
Well, what's hard about that, something that I struggle with still, is I, like, say you learn that, and I'm going to just start a load, say whatever it lifts, like a 400 pounds, in this session, I just noticed, okay, so 400 pounds really was a 9. How do you then, next time that comes up, not mentally go, okay, I should be able to do 400 pounds, and it's a 9. But maybe you're extra tired and you should have done like 385. Like, that's what I suck at, is like, once I know my potential, it's really hard for me to mentally not expect that from me every time going forth.
And you know the effects of fatigue and how it affects your training, and you still think to myself,
but I did it.
Be able.
Yeah. But I did it last week. It's so hard.
That's the issue with people too, is like, if they, let's say you did 400 last week, this week you're like, shit, I can't even do 380. Like, it's like they freak out, think I'm getting weak, or I'm gonna lose muscle, or I'm not gonna gain muscle. Like, they freak out on this. You're like, the way I explain it to myself, just to kind of try to be rational about it, is like, this 380 today felt just as heavy as 400, if not heavier. So therefore, I know my muscles were freaking working hard. The muscle doesn't know what the number is on the end of the bar.
Yeah.
It knows the stress it feels. I'm like, so how can you not get something out of that?
Yeah.
And that's where my penny analogy comes into place. It's like, there's still freaking penny going into your account. I mean, unless you don't train, then you're not depositing pennies. But if you're in there doing something, even if it's the shittiest workout you've ever had, it's something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten better at it, and I know, like, I'm like, okay, it's not a big deal. It's just this session. And I feel like I'll make the appropriate call now, and it's like, okay, well, then not that I'm lifting 400 pounds, but in this scenario, when that happens and shit at 385 feels heavy, it's like, okay, this is what we're doing today. But I still lightweight somewhere in my intestine. I'm like, this kind of sucks. And all right, next week, let's really get that 400. You know, like, I don't make the stupid calls as often as I know I've done that a lot in the past. I said, I ruined a good 6 months of my prep. I feel like grinding too hard last time. But I've gotten better at it because I got injured so many damn times. But there's, even now, still that lightweight, like, a little bit of emotional discomfort and a little bit of, like, being a little let down with myself, you know. It's hard. But anyways, Brad, not to steal your thunder, but when you when you realize you are now, okay, so do you ever, like, let yourself down like that? And is that where you mess up sometimes?
Do I ever let myself down?
Like, if that scenario comes up for you, or no, like, when you realize, okay, man, I was being a little bitch. Then going forward, do you take that lesson with you, or do you make stupid calls trying to chase that, or are you able to, like, mentally let go of the last session really well now? Mm-hmm. They've been doing this for so long.
I mean, yes and no, because I do try to just, you know, look at each individual session in context, but know that it's today's a new day. You know, today's different, you know, than the last day. It's Thursday instead of Tuesday, you know, or whatever. But yeah, that's pretty difficult to you know, to answer, you know, to be honest, because I still am learning, you know, and I still am now that I kind of know and know what my trial and error has taught me, this feels that way. Like you said, it's tough to know that, okay, well, you know what, this 9 this week feels like 9.5, or like you said, this 385 feels like the same 9, as it did at 400, last week. And plus, on top of that, I've got that number on that sheet that I'm kind of chasing too, and so that, I mean, I don't consider myself to be too emotional when it comes to my training in the gym, but a lot of times that's a challenge when you see that number on the gym, or that number on the sheet, and you're going after it in the gym, So that's a difficult thing to deal with too.
Real quick favor, guys. If you enjoy these shows and have been a listener for quite some time, we would really, 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 really appreciate it if you would take the time to give us a review on iTunes. Having lots of ratings and audience feedback makes our show become more visible across multiple platforms, which then supports our mission of helping as many people as possible to be the best athletes, coaches, and lifting enthusiasts they could possibly be. So if you're not driving and it wouldn't be super dangerous at the moment, pause this thing right now, give us an honest review on your podcast app, and we would love you even more than we already do. Thanks for taking the time. Hope you enjoy the show.
Well, let me ask y'all this. I'll start with Jeff. Like, what's, if you could pick one, maybe two of the most common audibles you call for yourself in your sessions?
I think a lot of, well, I can tell you what I base them on the most.
Okay.
So it's pretty easy for me now at this point, because I deal with a lot of aches and pains. Like, there's not a day that goes by where I'm not in some type of pain.
Same.
and that's a struggle. It's an emotional struggle, especially when you want to progress, and what's kind of limiting you is because the ability to move weight and train, I can still do it. That's not the issue. It's the connective tissue that doesn't always want to cooperate. So it's more like the audibles I'm calling is based on how I'm feeling, like what I'm capable of doing. It's kind of like that squat session. Like, I knew I wasn't capable of squatting, like, at full capacity, so I had to deviate. So it's a lot of those types of calls. There's like days where I'm just like shot, like I just don't have the energy to train, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna not train today. I'll train tomorrow. That way I can be more productive tomorrow than today. So no doubt I'll probably get more volume the next day. I'll be able to recover better. And because if I was to train today, let's say, then tomorrow is going to be really a tough day. It's a fatigue on top of fatigue type of thing. Yeah. So it's a lot of like, I try to really step back and think big picture, like kind of Brad was saying earlier about how Eric has this, big picture scheme in place. That's kind of like how I try to look at bodybuilding as a whole, whether it's training, nutrition, like all those things. I always take a step back and try to look through a wider lens and ask myself, if I do this, what's it going to affect? Is it going to affect it in a positive way or negative way? And like Brad said, I'm still learning too. Even though I've been doing this for, seems like forever, I'm still like on some days making really good calls. Others days it's like, well, that's not a good call. But that's where you learn. Like, okay, you really learn when you make a bad call. You're like, shit, okay, let's not do that again.
Yeah.
But to say that I have the answers ahead of time, like I write up this, 2 blocks of training, say, I'm going to run this perfectly as prescribed. Like, I can't recall the last block I ran where everything was exactly perfect to that. I could tell you I used to do that back in the day when I didn't know any better. And I would just grind my shit into the ground because I was a extremely hard worker. And I would just grind my shit into the ground because that's what I had wrote on a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. So it didn't matter how I was feeling. If I was feeling good, not feeling good, I'm going to follow this piece of paper. I'm going to follow this spreadsheet to the T because that's what it says to do. And I think a lot of people, when they do that, that's where they run into a lot of issues and they get themselves in hot water, whether they're trying to do too much or not enough. Like some spreadsheets, man, like on the days you do feel good, you're like, well, it says spreadsheet says to do this, so I better do that. And you might have a shit ton more in you and you're selling yourself short. So that's why for me personally, like I'll write a plan out, but I don't I would say I follow it maybe 80, 90% of the time. The other 10 to 20%, I'm calling audibles based on how I'm feeling. And I mean, obviously with the experience, it's easier for me to do that now than let's say it was 20 years ago, because I didn't have any experience behind it to make those calls. And that's where I think coaching comes into play, because a good coach can help you with those audibles. And like if you miss, like you were talking about earlier, if you hit, you're supposed to hit 400, but you hit 385. Why? Why is that? What, there's all kinds of moving parts. Is did you get enough sleep? Did you eat enough? Did you get enough food pre-training? There's all kinds of lists. You can basically just go down your checklist and go and see why that was. It could just, after you go down your list, you might have everything boxed off or checked off, and you're just like, you know what, it was just a bad day. You're going to have those every now and then. You're going to have peaks and valleys. And usually, like from my experience, whenever I'm like on a high peak, like Brad said, hey man, you're emotional. Like, yeah, I'm fucking going after it because I'm on a peak right now. I want to keep it going. But eventually you're going to hit a low. Like, it's going to come crashing down. And I think, the people who kind of outlast and who are the most successful, they know how to get themselves through those lows. And that's where, like, being in control of your emotions, especially in the weight room on those low days, is huge. It could keep you out of hot water. Like maybe you shouldn't be touching 400. Maybe you should be 350 that day.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you 385 felt like shit in the first set, don't do it again. Say, oh man, I'm 15 pounds down. You know what? Shit, I'm already being a pussy. I'm not going to be a pussy, so I'm just going to keep doing 385. No, maybe if 385 was really shitty, drop it down to 350, get a couple pennies, and just put it in the account and, hey, go to the next workout. So you don't create risk for injury, or you're not creating a bunch of excess fatigue that's harder for you to recover from in the future.
Yeah, or you shouldn't even be squatting at all, maybe.
Yeah.
Kind of like you did. You kind of switched to like your version of a leg press in a way, which is probably the best call you could have made.
I was like, okay, if I couldn't do that hack squat, like that Smith hack squat, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go to leg extension and leave it at that. So that was my next audible if that wouldn't have worked out.
Yeah. It's like that. Oh, go ahead, Brad. Sorry.
I was gonna continue on and answer your question of the most common audible.
Go ahead.
Because my most common audible is easy. I flip stuff around. I get the whole volume in the week, but I'll move stuff around. I'll move Tuesday to Thursday. And if I am feeling great, you know what I'll do? I'll say, okay, today's work is done. And, Tuesday, Thursday, whatever, I gotta do, 4 sets of 5 with something. I might knock one of those out on that day. And then when I come to the day that I'm supposed to do 4 sets of 5, I'll do 3 sets of 5, and I'll just kind of divvy up the volume that way. And 9 times out of 10, it ends up working out great, because if I do the opposite, say I quote unquote bitch out and I do my 3 sets of 5 instead of 4 sets of 5, you know what I mean? Because I'm not feeling too good, right? Or I'm feeling a little bit more fatigued, or, et cetera, et cetera. The next time I go to train, sometimes that day I'm feeling good. I'm feeling really good. I can get what I was supposed to get on Tuesday, that last set of 5, and then get what I'm supposed to do all done that day as well. That's my most common audible in the gym, is that I will move stuff around. I'll say, okay, let's flip day 2 and 3. So today's not a good day to do 2. Let's do day 3. Or I'll say, okay, I'm feeling good. Instead of taking this to the house or going up 10 pounds or, whatever, I'll go ahead and get a little bit of work done that I'm supposed to do on Thursday, right? And even sometimes if I'm feeling really, really, really good, I got these 2 main lifts I got to do, and then I got this list of secondary work I got to get done. So I'll get this 2 main lifts done, and then I'll knock off a shitload of my secondary work, And if I'm not feeling too good, I'll get like the bare minimum that I absolutely need to get done, and then maybe none of the secondary work. You know what I mean? So that's my biggest audible, and it's not only because, like Jeff, I'm dealing with aches and pains. My freaking rib hurts, and it's not a deadlift day, and my left butt cheek is sore, so I probably better do the lighter of the 2 squat days, and things like that. And then also time, because there's some days I know Wednesday I ain't getting any training done.
Yeah.
Friday I've been up all night. If I train, it's going to be terrible, so I just don't train on Fridays a lot of times. So I'm trying to deal with with time constraints and things like that.
Yeah,
But,
that's a big thing right there too, is like trying to train with life in mind. Like in the past, it didn't matter about life. Like it didn't matter if I was busy or not. It was like I'm training regardless, and nothing else mattered. And sometimes when you're pressed for time, in the back of your mind, you're like, oh shit, I got to get this stuff done after training. You'll rush your training. And it's like it ends up being a stressful training session. And I mean, if you're rushing, I mean, you can, knock on wood, you get injured, but yeah, you want to be able to train with good quality. And I think time is like a huge component to that.
Yeah, which is what I love about auto regulation, is because, okay, so you say that you do have to rush, and say that you do supposed to get X RPE or X load or whatever, and you can't, because you have to cut your rest time in between your sets because you got to get it done. It's okay. It's okay to let things fall off a little bit. Go from 400 to 385 like we were talking about before. There's a reason for it. You know what I mean? There's a reason why you had to bring volume down that day. But in the context of all the training, and like Jeff said, your body not knowing what that number is on the bar, you're still getting a productive training session. There's a reason why you can't do 400 or you can't do, the same amount of repetitions that you normally do. And I think a big light bulb comes on with most people when you tell them that. They'll be like, oh yeah, true. If there's a reason why the volume came down, the training was still very, very productive and very, very effective. It just was a different number on that day. And this is coming from the guy that focuses on the numbers, So yeah. I think that's a real valuable point.
Yeah. And like what I hear is, when you're new, right, the program is so important because usually it keeps you from doing dumb shit, like doing too much, hurting yourself, getting excited, changing your mind. And like the more and more experience you get, it's like you guys aren't going to add. Like if you do a day and a half of training, I mean, that's possible, but it's taking away from the next day. Like it's not like we're sitting here after training for at least a few years, each of us, that we're just going to magically be like, I want to max today. Like we just don't do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like later on, and not even that much later, I'd say after your first 2 or 3 years, right? From here on out, it's like the calls that you need to make are almost primarily to keep you healthy, I guess. Whether that's, like you said, you're being rushed, whether that's you're about to get injured, you got a pain here, your fatigue level needs to be handled here, your sleep was shit here. Like it's all basically to keep you healthy.
Yeah, because my mindset, like in my 20s, wasn't, hey, I'm trying to get sustained progress. It was more about, hey, I want fast progress. And I want, exactly. So the mental approach and the approach to training was more like, yeah, I got to get that 400 squat, not that 5. Like, no matter what, I got to knock that out. Whereas now I'm realizing, or have realized for a while now, that these audibles that we're talking about, that's what keeps you like healthy and keeps you training on a high level, like high quality training. And that's what you really want. I mean, because I think we all can say and agree that, as natural lifters or natural bodybuilders, like you can progress for decades. So if you're like 25 years old, you still have 25 years ahead of you. So how do you get that life out of your training? And if you're constantly pushing RPE super high, if you're constantly trying to shoot for that 400, you're gonna wear down. And then what? Then you're like, shit, now what? How do I work around these things? So there's like calling those audibles and having tools in your toolbox, like I like to say, like understanding what you can do to keep progress going. So there's always something you can do other than what your primary objective is. Like if you can't squat, okay, I can do leg extension. I can do leg press. I can't bench. Okay, I can do a pec fly or something. Whatever. There's always something you can do. You don't have the time to train. Okay, well maybe you can do there's other tools that you can use, myo reps and things like that. There's like all these different things you can do to get quality training in, and still keep progressing. There might be moments where you're, let's say on like I'm just going to use percentage. Let's say you're progressing at 5%. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it's better than zero. Because if you're being dumb in the gym and you bust yourself up, well, you're not gonna your percentage is zero.
Yeah.
So if you can get 1% this week, or you can get 20, 30% in a week, hey, you use your tools to get it, because it's all going to add up over time. And like, to me, like what I see now is just like a lot of talk on high volume, overreaching. I mean, that's great, but keep in mind that, you know, your body, because everybody has a breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I kind of just want to throw out there to people's, like, you have to make sure there's moments where you're taking care of yourself and not overreaching too much. Just think of it like a car. If you're driving down the freeway and you got your RPMs at 5,000 RPMs all the time, one, your motor's going to be freaking overheating pretty quick, and two, that motor's going to break at some point, and your gas mileage is going to be shitty. Whereas
you're going to run out of gas.
Yeah, you get on the freeway. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to step on the gas to get on the freeway. Yeah, your RPMs go up, you get up to speed, but then you get to a cruising speed, and that's where you get your mileage. And that's what you get. That's where you get, you know, a lot of good mileage, I should say. I'll leave it at that.
That takes me so back to my days of maximum overload training, and how I would just freaking run out of gas. And I always had this approach of beating what I did last week. You know, the great thing about that type of training is that it does teach you progression, but being the kind of people that we are, it was always, I got to beat what I did last week, you know, and I got to beat what I did last week. And what ended up happening inevitably for me, one week I would have a great week, and I would usually blow my normal performance out of the water. And then in my mind, the next time that I do that session, because back then it was a body part split. So the next week when I would do that session, I'd look at what I did last week and I'd be like, oh my God, how am I going to beat that? You know? And I did not have the knowledge or the, you know, whatever you want to call it, to say to myself, well, there's a reason why there is. In my mind, I got to beat last week. And when you're doing that, I ran out of gas. And I kind of lost my motivation to train, because I'm like, in my mind, if I didn't beat last week, it was like, it wasn't even worth doing.
Why'd you show up?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, those feels.
So, and that kind of takes me to where I am now, where sometimes my sheet helps me not bitch out. You know what I mean? Yeah. It having my sheet and having my, I think it's great that everybody has a program, and I think everybody should have a program. But at the same time, your program is kind of like a culture, I guess you might say. It's your plan, but you might deviate from it. And if you can stick to your plan 100%, man, that was a great block. And those don't always happen all the time, you know. But there's going to be times where you've got your block and you've got your theme or your culture or whatever you said. And then, like Jeff said, it doesn't always go according to plan. But at least with my sheet, there's been times when I'm like, I just don't want to train. You know, it's late at night. I got to get my work done. There's nothing wrong with me. You know, I'm fine. You know, I feel good. But I got to get the work done, you know, and a lot of times, one comes to mind here just recently, probably about a month ago. I was freaking at the gym like almost all night. I was there from like midnight till about like 4 a.m. There was absolutely not a thing wrong with me. But I would do a set. I would be absolutely wasted. I'd be fearful before every freaking set because I was afraid I was going to hurt myself. And but every time I would get down, I would stand up. I would get down, I'd stand up. And then I'd be resting for like 5 minutes, you know. And then I'd go at it again, you know. So sometimes my sheet kind of helps me not bitch out when I know that I've got stuff that I need to get done.
Well, I mean, we heard you say that you could be a little bitch. That's no way, because you're the dude that was outside on your deck in the snow squatting. So yeah,
I know it's a little. I know I'm a little crazy.
No, but I mean, I get what you're saying, Brad. Like I get what you're saying in that. Well, first off, right, as coaches, if I heard my athletes say, I hadn't done shit all day, and I wanted to get this training done. I went at midnight. I would have been like, dude, you could have just done that tomorrow. You know what I mean? But I think sometimes we have to test ourselves like that, like what you did. You know, like I don't think any of us would agree that like, yeah, that's smart. Just take 4 hours at middle of the night and try to get it done. You know, objectively, all of us, I think, including you, Brad, with one of your athletes, you'd have been like, you could have just done it tomorrow. It's not a big deal.
Well, or either that, or I would have asked. I would have said, why was it that you had to get that done that night?
Yeah.
You know, because in my case, it was Wednesday. I was leaving. I that was my last chance to get that done. You know what I mean? And so
you're preparing for competition soonish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean,
and I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The context is all there. So yeah, I think at the bare minimum, I would have said, now, why did you feel like you had to get that done?
Yeah.
You know, at midnight, and trust me, I plan on getting down earlier. You know. But you know how that goes. Life gets in the way. You procrastinate a little bit. You know, on this particular night, the wife and I were having a debate, you know, a discussion that was important.
Debate.
So you always got to balance that. You always got to balance that, you know.
Yeah.
Sure,
yeah. No, but
it was a debate, Brad. Sure. It was a debate.
No, but I think that's important in either way. Like when I think about big lessons, like I have definitely more of the bigger mistakes have been from going too hard, and then now you're shut down for a month because you were an idiot. You know, like you went hard for like these years, now you need months of chill. Like I've done that a couple times, but there's also, I can think pretty distinctly, like the end of last year, my final training cycle, I very distinctly remember being like, man, this is a lot of low percentage work for my Olympic lifts. Like, and I was thinking, and it was like the Christmas-ish time, or just about to be, and the program finalized first week of the new year of 2018. And I remember thinking every day that I had snatches and cleans and jerks, I was like, man, this is so much lighter than usual. This is so much lighter. And I was just like mentally like observing it. I was going to question the coach or whatever. I was like, man. And then I had a huge testing cycle. But it was after actually having a very low volume, like restful lead up to it. And that was one of the very few, that's actually the one I can recall, but I'm sure it's happened other times in my life where it's like, oh, taking a step back and being a little lower intensity for a while allowed me to, almost all my lifts went up. And if they didn't go up, it's because they were, like I tested back squats after snatch 1RMs or something like that. But I knew, you know, or vice versa. But it was an eye-opener to me that like, oh, maybe you don't have to go that hard all the time. And like Brad, you going at midnight, like I'll do that sometimes. I will, we've talked about how like sometimes when I have problems sleeping, I'll go to the gym at like absurd hours for me.
Absurd in the morning, yeah.
And
yeah.
I can take a little extra caffeine and I'm like, oh, I can get this done even when I'm tired and that feels good. Do I recommend it? No. But does it prove to me that like, yeah, sometimes you got to listen to your body and not be an idiot. But sometimes, like you said, if it's not like a testing day and there's nothing here that says you have to do anything extraordinary, it's just you train a lot and every workout's pretty hard, you know. And the fact that you can get it done with low sleep, no sleep during travel, whatever, that's, I don't know, like I feel like we need those sometimes for our pride, or just to remind you like, yeah, I can do that. Even when shit's not perfect.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience too.
That's how I feel about that one particular session. I was like,
you get all weird proud of it. You're like, why are you proud of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, I like, you think your guys are the only ones that I've told that to, but even now I'm like, yes, I did that shit. You know, I feel really good about it.
But I'm saying like it's a good thing to bring up, given the fact that we've just talked like for I don't know how many minutes about how like don't be an idiot, don't be an idiot, don't be an idiot. But I think like you have to learn yourself both ways. Like you have to prove yourself wrong a few times in both directions before you even know where this place is.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're someone who doesn't get up to RPE-9s ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the flip, there's there's people out there that could definitely push harder. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to test yourself. I mean, you want to be smart, like be safe.
Yeah. Pick your shots. Yeah.
Because there's sometimes, yeah. I mean, like I've been doing rack rows. It's not, yeah. I can probably find a different type of row that's safer and won't tax my leg as much. But you know what? I'm just like, I'm enjoying this challenge right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not hurting myself. It's hard, but I'm not hurting myself, and I'm enjoying it. And that's just that spark. Just knowing that I'm able to do it and the pushing, it's motivating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's helping me through this little leg of training I'm doing right now. Because sometimes, things can get stale.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to go outside of what is quote unquote optimal, and it's just have fun sometimes. So I do that from time to time. Like I call those audibles where I'm like, all right, let me just challenge myself here. Like I remember back in 2011, because I've done so many preps, like 2011, I was like, I want to do something freaking just different and out of the box. And of course, when I did it, Eric would say, Jeff, you don't have to do that. He'd always check me. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go on a 50-mile recumbent bike ride. And I would pedal for 50. I did 50 miles. Remember
How long
when I
did
did
it take
that
you?
prep?
How long did it take you?
It was 2 hours, I think. I think
No,
it was
close to
2
3. Close to 3.
It was a long time.
Did
I
your
remember. 'Cause I
butt
remember you
hurt?
took a picture of it.
Yeah. I think I got up every hour and took a minute break so my ass wouldn't hurt as much. But yeah, I did it. I did 50 miles on that. And Eric's like, you don't have to do that. Of course I didn't have to do it, but it was a challenge. It was fun. I also did I remember doing a 10 set of 10 on bench during that prep. Totally off, just because I was like, I need something to stimulate my mind.
Yeah.
And I did it. So every once in a while, I'll get out of the box a little bit and do these things that have no place in my plan whatsoever. And as long as they're relatively safe, why not?
And it does build confidence. It gives you confidence to know that, because there's times when I'll look at my sheet and I'll be like, Eric wants me to do what? And the only reason I get through those things a lot of times mentally, because I can do it. There's no reason why I can't do it. But a lot of times what does get me through mentally is knowing, you know what? You did a 4-hour friggin' workout in the middle of the night. you can do this, Think about Jeff riding that bike for 2.5, 3 hours, It gives you confidence to know that when things look daunting that you can handle them.
Yeah.
Because I've had that from some of my athletes. Like there's a little fear there. Like, oh shit, my numbers are getting up there, so it's like, oh, I got to pull that, or I got to squat that, so it's like, how do you get over that fear? And even myself now, I'm like, shit, I hope nothing breaks, Every time I get in a squat bar and I'm like, I'm moving up and load or something, like, shit, hopefully I don't break. And I try not to think about that. Like, I try not to let that enter my mind when I'm actually getting under the bar. Like, I try to stay as confident as I possibly can. Just say, okay, keep my form tight, make sure I'm doing everything the way it's supposed to be doing. Make sure I set those safety arms where they need to be. Like, everything's like, okay, let me have everything in place. And I do like when I acclimate up and load too, I'll do one set that's relatively close to the load I'll be working with, just do it for one. And that builds my confidence. Like, that tells me, yeah, you can do this, or man, it might not be a good idea to do that load today.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's so important that we do have our repeatable. I wrote a blog on it one time. What did I call it? Your repeatable.
Your routines, your rituals.
Your routine. Yeah, your rituals and routines. Yeah. Exactly. Because a lot of times, if I am fearful, once I get into the beginning of my ritual, that fear a lot of times goes away, because I'm not thinking about the weight on the bar and I'm not thinking about what I got to do. My mind is on my ritual and getting into all of those things that I do on every single set, whether it's a warm up set or, a heavy set or what have you. I think it's kind of off topic, but I think it's important to mention,
Yeah, it all matters.
Part of your self-coaching.
See,
Yeah, see that.
Woo. Way to bring it in, Jeff. Way to bring it in. So, so for people who are listening, maybe we could go over some of the common acceptable, like as coaches now. Okay, so I have athletes or whatever, and can y'all pinpoint one of the more common recommended ways to? It sounds like we understand that we don't need people to go any harder than their program. So maybe if we just agree on that going forward to this conversation, we know you have a program for a reason. You're not. It's pretty rare that you feel so extraordinary that we want you to do all this extra stuff, but if someone was feeling extra great and they've done all their work for the day, what are 2 or 3 recommendations that you guys think are safe that you would be okay with your athlete taking the liberty to do sometimes?
Can I go first, Jeff? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, you go first.
Because you know how I am.
We'll go the other way.
And if we do, I'll forget.
Okay, go. We'll go the other way, and that'll probably take longer. So I want to get this one done. Like, if what's a safe way to do that?
Yeah, because I really have kind of like 2 methods. Because I've got my power lifters and then I've got my bodybuilders, right? Mm-hmm. And so with my power lifters, I'll say, you know what, I other than, you know, some extraneous circumstance like lack of sleep, high stress, you know, what have you, there should be more good days than bad days.
Yes.
And so
Agreed.
When those occasional bad days happen, here's what I want you to do. We've got a certain amount of volume that we're trying to reach.
Wait.
Break up the sets.
Hold on. Are we...
Go ahead.
The question was, if you feel extra great, what are a couple things that I'd be safe with you doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll start that way then. I'll do both ways.
Okay, sure. So, let's do that.
If you're feeling extra great, okay, yes. I'm okay with you going 2.5 kilos, 5.5 pounds heavier than what I've got prescribed. I'm okay with that. But hit your numbers. Don't do, you know, an extra set, or don't do 3 or 4 extra repetitions. I'm okay with you taking that load up just a little bit, you know. Same thing with the other way. If you're not feeling good, I'm okay with you taking it down 2.5 kilos, or maybe breaking up your sets. Instead of getting, you know, 3 sets of 8, get 4 sets of 6. We still get the same 24 repetitions, right?
Yeah.
Now, my bodybuilders, since it's less about numbers and getting volume in, or I shouldn't say getting volume in, that's actually incorrect. It's less about chasing the numbers and right. chasing our percentages and things like that. Those folks, I'll say, you know what? I don't even care how much you have to bring the load down, but bring the load down before you bring your reps down. Because we all know, just by basic arithmetic, when you start trying to keep the load and those reps just dwindle off, that really dramatically affects your volume, you know, your tonnage. Not to mention that, like Jeff was saying, if you're fearful and you're cutting your depth on your squats, or you're not getting full range of motion on your overhead presses and your bench presses, now we're taking away even more volume. So take the loads down as much as you need to, so that you get good quality volume, good quality repetitions, and then of course hit our numbers. If it's 24 repetitions, try to get 24 repetitions. I don't care if it's 20 pounds lighter, but make them good quality repetitions, your usual range of motion, whatever that is, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if it's a good day, you know, which as we know with bodybuilders that are prepping, there's usually more bad days than there are good days.
Yeah.
But if it's a good day, I'll say, okay, well, you know what? If it's a good day, I'm okay with you early on in your sets, maybe getting an extra rep in. Maybe 2 extra reps. Because what oftentimes happens, as we know, is that fatigue really accumulates. It really adds up by the end of the set. Sometimes you can't hit your number. You know what I mean? So do that and get those gremlins out at the beginning of however many sets of a particular exercise you want to do. And usually it'll kind of take care of itself, you know, kind of through the rest of the workout. If you absolutely feel like you can go heavier, and you're certain, you know, and that's the big thing. I want you certain that you can get your volume in if you go heavier. If you have any doubts at all, don't. But if you're certain, yeah, maybe you can go up, you know, a kilo, which is what, 2.2 pounds, 2.5 pounds. So yeah, those are kind of my audibles that I'll kind of let athletes do on both sides of the scale.
Okay. Thanks for those, Brad. Anything else, Jeff?
I mean, you covered a lot of good stuff there. You know what I like to do sometimes? Like I do this with my kids. Like you can tell them all day, hey, don't do this, do this, do that. But until they actually make their own judgment calls, that's where they really learn. So unless, of course, my son's not going to get hurt doing something. If he's like doing something he probably shouldn't, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to let him do it. Because when he falls, he'll learn.
Yeah.
And then when he falls, and then I'll explain why we don't do these things or why we should do these things. And it sticks a little bit better. So sometimes with my athletes, and I don't prep powerlifters because I can't speak from the powerlifting side, but for bodybuilding, especially if you're prepping, especially nowadays, like everybody wants to do a shit ton of volume. Like, okay, you keep doing a shit ton of volume, we don't have the food to support that all the time. You're gonna feel like shit. But in one case, I'm not gonna mention who it was. He's like, hey, I want to do more volume. I'm like, you know what? Okay, so I built some flexibility within his program so he could. I gave him, okay, you can do anywhere between 3 to 5 sets, and it was only on, certain, like on the bigger lifts, I didn't do that, but on the smaller lifts, hey, 3 to 5, you pick days you feel good. If you want, go it up 5 sets. Days you don't, hey, keep it 3. And I know in my mind, like 90% of the time, if you give someone who's not fully experienced, they're going to go to 5 sets. Like they always want to do more. All right, you do more. So I think that lasted about 3 weeks, I want to say, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4 at most. And it was like, holy shit. All of a sudden you see it. Like, their performance is dropping off. Fatigue's starting to accumulate. They're starting to get more lethargic. And I'm like, okay, I'm taking the reins back now. You're going to do what I tell you to do now. And this is the reason why we're going to err on the side of 3 sets. So you can keep your quality of training high, keep your recovery high. So you're basically going to be more even keeled through the prep. And it's not like all of a sudden, if you're just staying at baseline 3 sets, you're going, oh shit, there goes your muscle. If your quality of training is super high and you're getting in, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to be just fine. So sometimes I let people just kind of learn on their own.
The hard way. Yeah.
Because it sticks more. And so I can tell them all day, hey, okay, I don't want you to go to 5 or whatever, because this is what's going to happen. Like, yeah, they might listen, but when they actually experience it, it's going to stick more and you'll learn more. So I do that from time to time. And as long as, if I feel like, if they feel like they're going to get hurt, then of course I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I think sometimes you just have to kind of, let the reins out a little bit and let them dabble.
Yeah. Good points, y'all.
Actually, that's a great analogy too.
I did that shit with Bert. I remember I was like in prep and I was like, I just miss running. And he was like, okay, we can have you. Because, like it's one of the smartest ways to get cardio done when you're prepping. And after like 3 or 4 months, I was like, can I 1 or 2 days a week? He was like, sure. I think I did like 3 sessions of running. And I was like, I don't need that the rest of prep. Thanks.
Okay.
I'm going to die.
One story. This one guy was like, I want to say, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, probably. I said, I don't want to do no hit cardio. I don't want you, because he wanted to run like sprints. I'm like, no, this is when hit was like, everybody was doing it. Everybody and their mother, and they're running and doing all this crazy shit.
That's when Eric tore his hammy?
A little bit after that, but it's just doing these crazy shit, pushing cars and all this crazy shit. But anyways, he's like, I want to run. And I'm like, no, I don't. I told him specifically, I do not want you running. High risk for injury. I want you to just stick to steady state, low risk for injury. That way you're training. Did it anyway, and he ended up tearing. I think he tore a quad.
Oh
and
my
that was
God.
it. Prep was over. Done. Just done.
Geez.
So yeah. I don't know why I told that story. I think
because it's just about mine. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying though. Okay. Takeaways besides that. I think those are really good though. Like what Brad said, those are like safe, measurable ways to begin to build it into your program, right? Plus or minus a certain amount of pounds. That's not absurd. Volume matching is always really useful to know how to do that. What else had you said? And then like earlier you mentioned if this is the amount of work I have to get done this week or this cycle or whatever, if 3 accessory exercises go from here to there, or if a set of squats goes from here to there, it's not going to ruin anything. Within reason, right? You don't do like 3 training sessions in one day and then 0 the next. Well,
yeah.
Actually, if you did 3 one day, you probably should do 0 the next. But you know what I mean. Don't get in that habit.
Yeah.
But.
I think what's a really important key too is if you're trying to self-coach yourself, like you're not going to know how to do that initially. But if you're on whatever program you're on, like don't deviate from it like stick to it for a good chunk of time so you can actually become more self-aware. Like if everything's consistent and you're following through, that's how you learn self-awareness, because you start realizing, oh, okay, yeah, when I squatted this time, this is the way it felt. That's why you figure out the context around it. That's why I felt this way.
Mm-hmm.
Then over time, you start making these adjustments, and whether they're good or bad, you start learning if they are indeed good or bad. So that's how you start becoming more self-aware, and you become more, I guess, the way you adjust yourself, you become better over time because you're keeping that consistency in there.
Yeah, that's a really good. I'm glad you brought that up right now, because when we say, again, within the context of this conversation, it's like these are things that we do in the gym within ourselves because, and we're talking about this for athletes because we're not in gym personal trainers. Like this is whether you have a coach or not. I think is why, like, it's not like you get a coach, you don't have to worry about this shit. It's like any experienced lifter needs to learn how to make those adjustments for themselves, because if you don't learn, then you don't know when you have to tell your coach, like, hey, actually this is an injury, or actually this program is beating me up, or actually this, after these 2 lighter cycles, my testing numbers, even though I feel fully recovered, I'm going down. I do need more volume, whether you have a coach or not, this podcast matters. Like everything we've talked about matters because it's how you learn yourself as an athlete.
Yeah, it's just like from my structure of my training, like the last few months, it's actually, I've been running an upper lower for like almost the last 9-10 years. At times I'll go to like maybe a bro split just to get more recovery. But for the most part, it's been upper lowers. And within that system, I've changed variables at times based on my own feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I'm trying to say is, like, if you're younger or you're starting out, like, don't like program hop every 2-3 weeks or whatever, because you're never going to be able to collect really good hard data on yourself. There's too many moving parts when you do that, and then you're be like slapping your head going, what the fuck is causing this, what the hell is causing that? And that's what I see often, is just people just changing things so frequently that it's hard to be self-aware and to make good judgments because the data is so inconsistent.
Yeah, a good story I've got to kind of drive that point home is the longest time that I ran Wendler's 531 Big But Boring. I remember I ran that as is, just like it said, for a long time. I mean, I think I ran like 4 blocks of that. So that's like, 16 weeks I ran that consecutively, right? And I just remember the first 2 times, because you're supposed to, kind of do a little increase in the load after every block. But the first 2 times was great. And then, I think the 3rd time it kind of flattened out a little bit. And then the 4th time it kind of flattened out even a little bit more. And I actually might have ran it a 5th time. But anyway, what I found out was on the deload week that Wendler puts in there, he drops reps and load. And what I found out when I just ran a couple of blocks where I dropped the reps only and maintained the load is that I was getting adequate enough recovery from my deload weeks, just lowering the volume through the total reps. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't already run 4 or 5 blocks of the entire program as is. And so, I just wanted to drive that point home with that particular story, because once I started doing deloads where I didn't drop the load down, I started getting that progress back again.
Like it was too much of a drop.
Exactly. It was too much of a drop. Yeah. And I remember that vividly.
That is a good lesson. And I think one other thing that you mentioned earlier in the conversation that would maybe be a good tool for people going forward too is that y'all set priorities, you and Eric. Like knowing that like maybe hitting your squats is more important than hitting every last tricep extension. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like just understanding.
That's an extreme, but exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes, that was an extreme.
Because it's important for me to get like my hip thrusts and my split squats in, as opposed to like my calves and my hyperextensions, right? So he'll put in green the hip thrusts and the split squats, and then one of those other ones will be yellow, and then the other one might be red as far as low priority goes. So I think that's And two, some people, like I just had a Skype session the other day where a guy just wanted to add more shoulder work. And so I kind of had to rationalize with him. I said, why? Why are we going to add that shoulder work? Because here's what the numbers show. That was the second best improvement of everything. This thing improved 12%. That one improved 10%. You said earlier in the conversation that your shoulder development feels better, So what would be the purpose of adding more shoulder work?
If it ain't broke, don't. Yeah.
Exactly. So with me, it's kind of like, okay, well, my hip thrusts help my glutes fire on my squats, and it keeps my hips mobile. Very important. Okay. My split squats help my knee stability, probably originating from my hip, right? Very important. Calves, is it really all that important that I have well-built calves for powerlifting? No. Arguably, maybe ankle mobility, but at the same time, I work on ankle mobility every single session. Maybe I don't have to support that with more, calf work. That one I can probably let slide a little bit, you know. And then the hyperextensions, we kind of threw that in there because my deadlift volume dropped down so much. So it's kind of a just in case thing. So that's kind of low on the priority list too. So we've got actual reasons why these are in the program and why those are important. And these ones are in there for kind of, like we say, good, better, opposite, good, better, best. These are kind of the good ones that we want to have in there.
Yeah. That was actually, you bring up why that probably even, I was trying to make it an overly obvious example, but that might not be if you have certain injury or movement patterns that need to be worked on or whatever. So, okay, so for you, establishing what is the most important, and for most people who are following either their coach's program or a well-known, intelligently built program, typically the most important things are at the beginning of the workout, and the latter things aren't quite as important to the purpose of the program. But like you mentioned, Brad, these certain exercises that for most people maybe wouldn't be super important are important for me because they help me fire my glutes for my squats, and I'm a powerlifter, and the squat is the most important thing I can do. Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So good points also. So if you're being coached, that might be good to be like, hey, I have so much time, and I only have 90 minutes to get my sessions in, and I keep missing the last exercise or two every time. How do we adjust for that or whatever? Maybe your last 3 exercises, the order doesn't matter, and every third day, you get at least one of them in, or for an example. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Anything else? I think we did a good job.
Yeah, I think so too. The only thing that came to my mind is I want to go back to breaking up sets.
Okay.
Because one thing that I always try to tell people is that, 24 repetitions is 24 repetitions, but here's the lesser of the audibles, or I guess the best call you can make is if I've got 3x8, do 4x6, right?
Yes.
Because those two are pretty close together.
Yes.
I said, but
Same
only
way.
if you absolutely have to, do you do 8 sets of 3. That's like that's the most sinful audible that you could make, because obviously a 3-rep set is dramatically different physiologically right down to the cellular level than an 8-rep set. So if you have to break up sets like that, try to keep it as close to what we have programmed. And only on the rare occasion when shit's just going to hell in a handbasket do you really deviate from the plan, staying within the numbers.
So you don't want them to do 24 singles.
There you go.
Okay, let's leave it there. That's good.
I've never thought about that, but yeah, that's actually really, really good.
All right. Point well taken, Brian.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. 3DMJ prides itself on keeping this show, our blog, and our YouTube channel as free and relevant sources of information for our community week after week. We also release additional free video courses as often as possible at 3dmjvault.com. If you'd like to help support our mission and our work, please consider becoming a monthly patron of our endeavors. Go to patreon.com/team3dmj and donate as little as $1 per month to our cause of helping educate and grow the drug-free bodybuilding and powerlifting communities worldwide. You can definitely choose to donate more, and if you do so, we'll send you discount codes for future use on any of our paid products. But any little bit helps, and we appreciate your monthly support in any amount that you see fit. So again, you can start assisting the team at patreon.com/team3dmj. That's patreon.com/team3dmj. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you in the next show.